When mentioning John D. Rockefeller, one often immediately thinks of his colossal, unparalleled fortune, the title of Oil King, and the Standard Oil empire that once manipulated the entire American economy. Yet, behind the aura of the richest person in modern history lies a life besieged by adversity, mental crises bordering on death, and the bitter loneliness of someone shunned by all society. His life was not a series of consecutive successes, but a diary filled with wounds, failures, and resilient efforts to survive amidst storms. The first and most bitter failure in Rockefeller's life did not come from the business world, but from his very own family home. Born in 1839 in Richford, New York, young John had to learn to mature in extreme humiliation and insecurity because of his father, William Avery "Bill" Rockefeller. His father was a quack, a professional con artist who claimed to be a botanical physician to sell fake cancer remedies. He was frequently away from home for months at a time, leaving his devout wife Eliza and their children in destitution, without a single penny to their names. Each time he returned, Bill brought back bundles of cash earned from his scams, but instead of bringing happiness, he sowed distrust. Bill once proudly declared that he intentionally deceived his children to teach them to be sharper. The deception from his own parent left a deep emotional wound, turning John into a quiet, reserved child who was always wary of the world around him. While his father was the source of humiliation, John's mother, Eliza, was the one who bore all the suffering. During certain periods, the family fell into a state of not having enough food, having to live on the charity of neighbors. Rockefeller spent his childhood years with frayed shoulders on his shirts, torn shoes, and a constant fear of poverty. The failure to have a normal, happy family was his motivation, but also a psychological abyss that haunted him for the rest of his life. At 16, with a desire to escape the shadow of his father and help his mother, John traveled alone throughout the city of Cleveland, Ohio, to look for work. It was the summer of 1855, a period of mild economic recession. The thin, well-dressed teenager, holding a certificate from a short-term accounting course, knocked on the doors of every bank, every transportation company, and every warehouse along the riverbank. For the next 6 consecutive weeks, from early morning until late at night, John received nothing but cold shakes of heads and dismissive glares. Many people didn't even bother to look at his resume. In his later memoir, he shared that every night, returning to his cheap room, he had to struggle intensely with feelings of despair and the urge to give up. He himself understood that if he failed to find a job, his family would completely collapse. Finally, on September 26, 1855, the Hewitt and Tuttle Transportation Company agreed to hire him as an assistant bookkeeper with a meager salary, $16 for the first 3 months of work, equivalent to less than 50 cents a day. Instead of being discouraged by the paltry salary, Rockefeller plunged into work like a machine. He meticulously recorded every penny in a small notebook he called Ledger A. This notebook did not just record income and expenses, it was also a testament to the iron discipline that helped him overcome the challenging startup phase. In 1869, when Edwin Drake found oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania, a black gold fever exploded. Many people rushed into oil extraction like moths to a flame, but Rockefeller saw a fatal flaw. Extraction was very precarious, whereas oil refining was where sustainable value was created. In 1863, he and his partners established the first oil refinery. However, the oil industry in its early days was a chaotic and brutal battlefield. The recurring failure of the market at the time was the state of bumper harvest, falling prices. Oil prices fluctuated wildly, at times plunging from $20 down to 10 cents a barrel due to supply exceeding demand. Refineries competed dirtily, lowering selling prices below cost to destroy one another, causing a series of businesses to go bankrupt overnight. Rockefeller himself stood on the verge of bankruptcy many times due to lack of capital. To maintain operations and buy out weaker competitors, he had to borrow huge amounts of money from the banks at exorbitant interest rates. There were nights he stayed awake, pacing the room in a state of extreme mental tension, wondering if the bank would come to seize all his assets the next morning. Not only did he face financial crises, but he also faced the risk of losing everything due to fires. Refining technology at that time was still very primitive, and kerosene was extremely flammable and explosive. Rockefeller's refineries were burned down by fires more than once, robbing him of his hard-earned investments. Instead of weeping before the ashes, he quietly gathered his last remaining capital to rebuild from scratch with a higher safety standard. It was from these painful failures that Standard Oil was born in 1970 with the goal of standardizing quality and stabilizing the oil market. To make Standard Oil the hegemon, Rockefeller had to execute a ruthless strategy, shaking hands with railway companies such as Cornelius Vanderbilt and Tom Scott to receive special transportation discounts while increasing freight rates for competitors. This game pushed him into life-and-death confrontations. In 1872, the Cleveland Massacre event took place. In less than 3 months, Rockefeller swallowed up 22 out of 26 rival refineries in Cleveland. Although victorious in business terms, he incurred extreme hatred from the public. Independent oil drillers in Pennsylvania rebelled. They burned down Standard Oil's tanks, spread nails on the tracks, and organized massive protests. Rockefeller was called a blood-sucking monster and the strangler of the American dream. He constantly received anonymous letters threatening his life and threatening to kidnap his children. For many years, he never went out without a bodyguard, and he always kept a loaded pistol right by his bedside. The fear of being assassinated and the pressure from society's hatred began to gnaw at the health of this iron man. In the 1890s, when Standard Oil controlled up to 90% of the refined oil in the U.S., it was also when Rockefeller had to pay the highest price for his success. The horrible work pressure, the constant lawsuits, and always having to stretch himself to deal with competitors caused his body to revolt. He suffered a complete health breakdown at the age of 53. Rockefeller suffered severe nervous exhaustion. His digestive system was so destroyed that he could eat nothing but yogurt and crackers. More seriously, he suffered from alopecia, causing all the hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes on his body to fall out, making his appearance gaunt and bizarre like a living corpse. That pain was summed up by him in a bitter confession to his private doctor. He was wealthier than anyone else in the world, but could not buy a good night's sleep or a normal meal like a worker. His doctors issued a stern warning. If he did not give up work and reduce stress, he would die in less than 1 year. The failure to balance life and maintain his health forced the Oil King to make a painful decision: retire from directly running Standard Oil in 1997, relinquishing his throne at the peak of his power to save his life. In 1911, the biggest failure in Rockefeller's career arrived in the form of a historic legal ruling. After years of investigation by the government and the push from biting investigative articles by female journalist Ida Tarbell, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil had violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. The court ordered tearing apart the Standard Oil empire, Rockefeller's brainchild, his life's work, into 34 independent companies, which later became giants like ExxonMobil, Chevron, Amoco. However, financially, this split inadvertently increased stock prices and made Rockefeller even wealthier. Mentally, it was a painful punishment. The greatest work that he had used all his blood, sweat, and tears to build was considered a danger to the nation by the state and was terminated. In his final years, Rockefeller lived in extreme loneliness. His contemporaries passed away one by one, the public never stopped criticizing him, and his children always had to live under the terrible pressure of their father's shadow. To atone for past mistakes and find peace for his soul, he spent the second half of his life on philanthropy, donating more than $500 million to found the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research to find cures for deadly diseases. The life of John D. Rockefeller is a clear proof that the road to the top is never paved with roses, and wealth does not come with a peaceful life. The difficulties from childhood, the times he was near bankruptcy, the shunning by society, and the breakdown of his health were the most ruthless teachers that molded his character. He did not overcome adversity with luck, but with an iron spirit, absolute discipline, and the ability to learn from the most painful failures. Until his final breath in 1937 at the age of 97, Rockefeller left a profound lesson for posterity. Success is not measured by the fact that you have never failed, but is measured by the number of times you stand back up after each time life knocks you down.